well. But I'd moved house, and I'd actually moved from West London to East London. So I'd gone on autopilot heading home, and then unfortunately it all just went a bit peaked on from there. And of course I didn't notice because it was my regular journey, right? So I was just doing exactly what I would have done on every other time that I would have done it.
How far did you get all the way there?
I ended up about a £50 and sort of 5-minute taxi the wrong way, which, you know, in the wee hours of the morning is enough, right? It's kind of not what you want to be doing.
Well, interesting. So we just had a nice small story when it comes to Mike and the subway, essentially taking the tube the wrong way. But the question is, Mike, did you mind the gap? Did you fall in the hole in between the train, or did you make it on the train?
Oh no, I made it. I made it on the train. This one I wish I'd missed, actually. But
awesome. Well, we're talking about minding the gap today because on today's podcast, we're going to be speaking about lessons in leadership around minding the gap of management when you are managing product teams and then you're building and you're scaling so you have multiple teams. And think of all these teams as different trains going different directions in the tube. You've got to not only navigate where you're going to go, but you've got to mind the gap. So we're going to talk about the safety measures that we need to take as leaders and managers as we build and grow our teams. Now, my name is Ryan Foland. I'm a global keynote speaker. I talk about simplicity. My company's Influence Tree, and we help people become real people, like humans online. It's a lot of fun. But today we're going to be speaking with humans here who are involved in scale-ups. That means that they are having the problem of growing pains. That means that they're moving and shaking. We've got everybody from around the world, really. We're looking at India all the way to London today. So Max, I'm going to kick it off to you, and you are going to pepper these gentlemen with some questions, and we'll hopefully pull all of the insight out of their brains so that we can mind the gap and get on the right train.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Yeah, really excited about the talk today. You know, at Monese, I had products. When I joined, we had three product teams, sort of 35 people. We now have 10 of nearly 100, and these are full stack product teams. And you know, I'm really keen to learn sort of the lessons about sort of the difference between leading one team and then leading multiple teams. I think there's so much that I've learned and still to learn that I'm really excited to have Vineet and Mike join me today to start and discuss what's the huge differences between leading one team in one very small domain, the sort of effectively being a product executive where you're looking across a portfolio of products and a number of teams. So I just really love, Vineet, could you just sort of briefly introduce yourself? That'd be fantastic, and explain broadly how you're structured and what you do.
Okay. So thanks, Max. I mean, for introducing me. I mean, I am the head of product for GO-JEK for the digital payments and integrations. What I mean by that is that GO-JEK has almost 18 plus products, right, from food tech to fintech to hyperlocal. So from there, our digital wallet is one of the biggest products. I mean, with GO-JEK, and my job is to make sure that your money does not stay in your wallet, right? So money does not stay in your wallet means that you have enough places to actually spend your money with the digital wallet, which is called as GoPay. So whether we are integrating with your fuel stations or your even your vending machines, I mean, everything goes under that. That also means that we have I mean, all the other digital payment solutions wherein, I mean, you pay your bills, you top up your mobile, all those, I mean, comes under this. There has been around so what we say is that 1 in every 2 in nation have installed this app. We have about 125 million downloads. There are about 300K merchants on GoFood platform, which is our food tech platform. 80% of these are actually small mom and pop shops that rely heavily on GoFood for their revenues, right? And then on the GoPay ecosystem actually processes about 6.3 billion of annual GDP. So that's the scale we are talking about. And as I said, I mean, we have like 18 plus products, and then we start off with the one, and now we are, I mean, just growing.
That's amazing. I think it's such a huge success story in terms of scaling, both scaling customers, scaling the money moved, and scaling the team. So just briefly, just explain what your area looks like, sort of the number of teams you've got.
Sorry, can you say that again?
So what I'm really interested in is you lead the sort of the wallet and the payments teams. Sort of how many teams are there that sort of reporting to you?
Sure. So basically we have, especially I'm going to start off with one team. So we were based out of Bangalore for the tech, but now it deals with a lot of cross-functional teams, and we have leaders from engineering, from program management, from sales, from support, from operations, legal, marketing, and to top that, we have multiple products running, right? I mean, multiple instances at the same time which is happening, which are across different. You have your data science team, let's say, sitting in Singapore, and you have your business teams as well as tech in Jakarta, as well as in Bangalore, right? So there is not a clear demarcation of where exactly what teams. I mean, we are just a global. Now, I mean, anywhere, I mean, wherever we fight that, consider, I mean, more than 10 teams working together to build multiple products. So that is how, I mean, we are working on that.
Okay, so it sounds like very mission-centric teams plus a mixture of virtual across a number of different sites. So that's got to be very complex. Mike, I'd love to hear sort of your role and sort of the teams you lead and how you structure it.
Yeah, hi. So I'm the CPO for Form 3, one of the founding team here. We're now just coming up to 3 years old. We provide payment technology to regulated businesses. So effectively the shared infrastructure for banks, fintechs, insurance companies, new market entrants, digital banks, and now increasingly tier 1 providers for their connectivity into payment ecosystems. So we started in the UK, and we're now live in Europe as well, and from there the world, or something like that. So team-wise, the organisation itself, we've just crossed through the 50 people barrier during that period. We're growing really fast. From a product perspective, that means we've kind of moved from a team to what is now constructed as 4 product owners with some sort of cross support. So we're just moving into a model where product owners effectively face off into development teams, which are a ring-fenced resource for them to sort of build, not quite on a whim, but broadly to a plan. With autonomy to do that. We're now layering in BA support to increase the speed with which those product guys can kind of get through those changes. And then we have some sort of more functional views of the world from a product perspective that looks at consistent approach to documentation, design, and identity. And those sort of read across the more sort of functional teams that are growing.
That's a great introduction, because you've already sort of touched on a number of key things. In terms of the empowerment for the teams. I think you made a light little joke of it there in terms of that they can do stuff, but within reasons. I think that's especially one of the challenges I face, which is sort of how do you empower the teams without empowering them until you disagree with them, or with true power. A lot of people forget the power in empowerment. So that's definitely one of the challenges I want to explore. And then the second one you raised, which is consistency. So let's stay with you, Mike, and let's dive into what do you think are the biggest challenge you face now with these 4 product leads and the 4 teams where you at least have one. It must be quite a change. What do you spend most of your time doing, or what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, so I think having come out of banks before, I think the most difficult role that there is when you're sort of player managing, because you can't quite run your team, right? But you're also responsible for your own kind of output. And I think the space that we're just transitioning out of is that. So we're now in a space where the product owners, the product leads in Form 3 have what's the best way to describe this? Precise deliverables in kind of the short term, and that keeps sort of focus and consistency across the organisation. the direction of travel for their product sets is very much up for grabs. So this is where they can start to look at the demand that's coming specifically from the big clients that they've got or big clients they want to target, and then they can start to talk, I suppose, to me about that in terms of capacity and return. So what do they need from me, and what are they going to give back? And that's kind of the model we're moving into. So they get X amount of development resource in a team, because we could do other things with that. And in exchange for that, what should I expect in terms of the iterations of short-term deliverables, but also the size of the market and the groups of customers that they're working with.
That's really interesting. You see Jeff Bezos say things like, be very rigid on strategy and be loose on execution. It seems like you sort of turned that slightly on its head.
So there's rules of the game, right? So so we're super, super clear on things we don't do at all.
Okay. What you don't do, it's key.
Yeah. So I mentioned actually strategy, like the what you do bit, you kind of fudge in, right? So does it tick strategy? You just tick it off, right? I mean, that's because everybody bends it. So we're super clear on the stuff that we really don't do. So there are just areas that are off limits. And there are areas that are off limits for periods of time. So for example, we're saying now that for us, the generic demand from our customers is number of endpoints, not the thickness of processing work that we do with our clients, which are kind of the two ways we think about the world. And so because of that, actually within the rules of the game, so things we don't do in the next 12 months, this is where we're focused. Actually, how you guys, from a product perspective, then kind of crystallize that into, I can expect this when, and this when, and this when, and we'll generate what, and how does that inform the next kind of phase of our development? So I would never go against Jeff. That would be foolish. But I think rules of the game are kind of, for me, they're kind of a given, they're kind of set, and everybody plays within those. How they achieve maximum, value, return, penetration of their products, that is absolutely for them to work out.
That's really interesting. So what we learned, whether for good or bad, what we learned, the tripling the size of the team in 6 months was, in the past, the vision and the strategy was always the stories that we told each other and the CEO's vision, but that doesn't scale. So what we've had to do recently is try and codify, or get him to codify it. And obviously he's got a very big brain, and he can, but for getting him away from fundraising or everything else to sit down and spend, an entire week just focusing on one thing and say, please help us understand what's in your brain, really was a great exercise for him, because he could bounce it off other people. But that was very helpful for me, because I can then go to the teams, this is Norris's vision of the future. As what's your vision of the future? How does personal accounts fit into that? How does business accounts? How does payments fit into that? And that was really helpful, because you're not bounding the team very, very strongly at all. You're saying, look, here's the vision of the future. What do you think your vision is? And that's great, because you find out that if you've articulated it wrong, or if they've misinterpreted it, at least you get that feedback. In the past, you would have just said, here you go, do this, or this is the vision. You would not have heard anything back, and you would have been surprised when something changed later, because you didn't get that feedback, that people just didn't understand, or you didn't share that vision. So there's something that we got wrong, and we started to see people sort of suggest the wrong decisions, and not make some decisions, but suggest the wrong things. And so we went through this, and it really helped. Vineet, I think it's really, let's jump on, jump down with GO-JEK. Sort of, how do you what are the challenges that you've faced running these multiple teams that seem a lot less structured than where we've got? So I'd love to see sort of how you manage this. Is it like managing cats, a herd of cats? I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So basically, it started off with starting off with one team at a time, right? There was one product. You start off with one product, you go get into the details, then you get a hold of it, then you move on to the next product, and then your product portfolio starts increasing. You find synergies, and then you start doing it, right? The biggest problem there then becomes how do you delegate versus inspire others, right? What happens is that because you were so close so deep into the product that you know exactly how the product works, right? if somebody new coming in, I mean, there's a product owner who you are supposed to coach and also give them direction. That was the biggest challenge which was there always. There was always an urge to actually handhold them and take them to the point where you want them to be, then actually inspiring, developing, and guiding them to reach there, right? So that was one. Then there's the whole location thing was also, I mean, the boundaries were also a big issue. Initially, what happens is that because, I mean, if you're meeting face to face, you can understand exactly, I mean, what it's just more personal. I mean, you understand how exactly the product is being driven, or what is the vision of that product by that product owner, right? So initially, I mean, how I used to do is travel more often, right? So it would be like every week you're in Jakarta, the next week you're in Singapore, and then the next week you're in Bangalore. So continuous travel, build relationships, and then finally give them a piece of the information, I mean, what they need to actually build the product. The other important problem which I faced as well was the knowledge gap, right? There's always being the leader, you will have access to information due to your close proximity with the senior management that you might not be available with the product owners as such. That itself also becomes a problem sometimes, right? I mean, you don't know exactly what all information has been shared, or what all I have even communicated, because I mean, there's so many products going on, right? So that itself was also another problem, wherein, I mean, I would involve all of them to come to the same meetings, so that, I mean, if there are feature pods wherein everybody is involved, everybody has the same information, and there are no silos of information. Yeah.
So that's so true. But I found both ways. I found the teams don't have some of the context that I'm exposed to, but then often I don't have some of the context the teams have. For us, the decision we've made here at Monese is the team is accountable for the success or failure of the product, because we feel we hire very senior people. We've not got to the point where we can train yet, but we'd love to get there. If the team know the customer the best, if the team know the technology the best, if the team know the product the best, the team should make a decision. But what that means is there's often an information asymmetry, which is the team have got information from the technology or from the customer that they're sort of spending 1 day a week with customers, trying to get that feel from the customer. But then there's stuff that I've been exposed to that I can't share. It's a huge question. How are you solving that? One of the ways that I think you said is inviting them to the meetings. Obviously, there's only I go to a lot of meetings. I'm sure all of us do. It's probably one of the main things we do. But how do we enable this share of perspective without all being in meetings all of the time?
Sure. So basically, I mean, this is what we do as a new thing which we keep on doing with GO-JEK everywhere, is having product inceptions. So initially, what you do is float a doc with all the information available, and then share it with all the stakeholders. Everybody come up with questions, answers, and we keep on updating the working doc so that every information available, because I mean, the moment you get questions, you know that, oh, this information is missing from the doc, which is in my head, but it is not in the doc, or it is with somebody else, or he might ask you some questions which was not explored as such, and then you keep on updating the doc till the time, I mean, the update starts reducing, right, on the doc. Then you hold a full-fledged inception. The inception. And then inception one, we have one rule that everybody involved, or all the key stakeholders, would be in the same room. Okay, so we fly down everyone, either it will be in Singapore or in Jakarta or in Bangalore, wherever it doesn't matter, but have everybody in the same room, because this is the most important meeting which will ensure the success of that product, right? Because it's a kickoff meeting. Have everybody in the room, discuss it out, I mean, go through each and every detail of the product. Have questions, get them answered right there. Whoever is the stakeholder is supposed to answer, get them there. Get everybody on the same page, and then start working on it. Now there is no information asymmetry, right? I mean, that everybody has the same information as we have.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting because what you're doing is balancing asynchronous communication with synchronous. You sort of, through the doc, it's asynchronous, so people can pull that communication and that can live. But then you're balancing that with a point in time where you lock everybody in the room and say, right, okay, we're going north or south or east, and then you sort of get agreement that you might end up going north, northeast, or even even further. But at least everybody at the start is sort of, we do the same thing. We very much have a kickoff. We've got a set list. These are the people you must invite. It happens. Anybody from the company can attend, and the product lead goes, right, I'm going north or I'm going south. And then they do a bit of work. They try to get it to a sort of 60-70% answer, not too much, because nobody likes to see that wasted. But then we get everybody, and they go, right, here's what an MVP looks like. Here's what we're considering next. Any feedback? Because if you're not in the meeting or you don't give any feedback, then we just assume you've given your approval, and then you go and get it done. Obviously, there are risks with that you have to manage. But that one point in time where you can say, right, okay, this is the broad direction of travel. I think that's one thing we learned quite quickly we need to do. Mike, I'd love to hear how do you sort of balance this, and how do you manage it?
So I think we have a couple of tools, a couple of challenges at the same time. So we're still small enough as an organization. I didn't think we would still be doing it now, but there are weekly full organization calls. And I don't see those going anywhere. So that the reason we do that is because our engineering team is 100% remote, and they're all over.
Oh, okay.
So we don't have concentrated development teams at all. Our engineering function is 100% remote, and so the office here is effectively a touch base to introduce new people, or actually, if they want to do something, it's face to face. But they're all over Europe and all over the UK. So from that perspective, actually, comms is super important to us organisationally. So we're very open about the communication, and so that means that the way we talk through and the way we run those full organisational sessions include sort of by design the product owners every week working through not only the progress of the things that they're working on, but also the flight path of the things that they're thinking on. And feedback from the different functional areas of the organisation back inwards that would help to influence their own sort of thought process. And actually, it's been really powerful. We do it for it's a 1 hour standing session once a week, and so far, that's been really, really positive as a way of keeping everybody lined up. I think the other thing we found is because that is also flat, the organisation is flat. Because of that, actually, we don't have a hierarchical distribution of information issue yet. We will get to that, and I'm sure as we grow, we haven't hit that issue quite yet. The other thing that we do is, this is going to sound like a shameless plug, but actually I really like it. We use tooling to support product management specifically.
Okay.
So integrations out of the AHA road mapping and requirements tool into Git as our kind of primary development tool. We've worked really hard to use that as a mechanism for ensuring visibility actually across the development teams, but also across the product organization about the various sort of component blocks that are being manufactured. And what that's helped us do just at a very practical level is the first people in the organization who hit a problem, or the first people who hit a development requirement within a team, are mandated to solve it on behalf of the whole organization. So they don't solve it for their release, they solve it conceptually for the whole organization. And again, that kind of forces them to kind of come out of the, I'm delivering my MVP at all costs. Clearly is the focus, but actually if they're the first people that have to deal with batching, or the first people that have to deal with processing load problems, or whatever it is, the way they solve and then have to go back on behalf of the rest of the organization is kind of keeping the interaction and the conversations going.
So I think a number of points you touched for are sort of consistency between sort of the teams, which is a really interesting one, because how do you empower the teams and sort of let them do something, plus how do you balance consistency? And I think there's probably actually a direct trade-off. The more you centralize, the more consistent you are. The more decentralized, by definition, the less consistent you are. So how do you, so I think managing consistency for me is one of the biggest things I have to think about. It's, what we've done at Monese is we've created chapters around specific communities of interest. So iOS, Android, Java, design. And the chapters do the how. So they're responsible for the how, the teams do the what. So the teams own the what they build, the chapters own the how. But I mean, that's worked, but not always. I'd be really keen to understand with both of you, perhaps you, Mike, because we've been talking about this, is, are you still too small, or how are you solving this consistency? Is it you as one man solving this consistency still, or is it?
I hope not. I really hope not. Otherwise I'll be a lot grayer next time we talk, right? So I mean, we all find the best people we can find, and they're brilliant, right? And so they have to be able to be brilliant. Otherwise, what's the point? So I think, again, I sort of try to think about the world in the sense of, we kind of all know there are things which will hurt the organization based on the organization. So if a bunch of my product managers, product owners, diverge on how we think our customer-facing API is going to work, we have a massive problem, right? I mean, this is just, it can't diverge, right? That just doesn't work. So what we're trying to do is identify the things that organizationally for us would be a problem, and be consistent in those by tackling that issue and sort of deliberately making a decision on that issue. So I think one of the problems with consistency is you sort of don't quite, do you know what I mean? You get independent half solves or near solve, I solve for my bit and I didn't really think about the implications. So we're trying to get this consistency. It's not, I wouldn't say it's as by consensus, but it's informed where we know those things will hurt us. So if there are, API is one, documentation is another. If we veer off in a totally different experiential direction for that, customers can't buy multiple products from us, and that's what our business model is predicated on. So that doesn't work. Not necessarily, rules, but just an awareness of where we need to make an organizational decision rather than a specific one, I think is what.
That's really interesting. So touched on two things, which is rules, which is one of my favorite topics. We try, for example, I'm sure you're in the same boat as us. If two different teams treated money different way, you would have an immense problem reconciling. If a team did 8 decimal places and trimmed, and another team did 8 decimal places and rounded up, very, very quickly that would be an absolute nightmare. But you touched on tools. So we try to go for tools and not rules. So there is a suggested consistency, and if you're going to break for that, have a think about it first. For example, if you were going to do Zimbabwean money, that's got a very different number behind it than GDP. So it might be that actually you do have to do money in a different way, but at least you've taken that decision explicitly. What we're really interested is, do you have enforcers? It doesn't sound like it, but who enforces the rules? Are they self-policed, or what happens there?
So far they've been they kind of result occasionally in a very happy, yes, okay, it was a misunderstanding, we're all good, everybody actually meant the same thing and we didn't really think about the consequences, and therefore we'll kind of harmonize and everybody's great. Occasionally they just are totally different viewpoints, right? And those turn into quite heated conversations, actually.
The religious debates that you were saying.
They just, I mean, and we kind of, we're not in the mode of shutting those things down at all. I mean, they just need to happen, because until we can find a way of solving it for the organization, if we don't do that, our customers can't buy it. And so we have to answer this question, right? Otherwise you can't expect a client to have fundamental principles of our promises to them broken just because we couldn't agree on something. So we just have to work them out. And I think, to your point, that doesn't mean there's a rule of the game. It just means that everybody is looking for those, actively trying to find them and share them and resolve them, because they just don't want to come unstuck later, right? They don't want it to not work.
And what we found is, especially with these sort of religious type issues, is you can't stop them. You need to let them. It's like a boxer. You need to let him punch. You need to let everybody punch themselves out, and let the emotions subside. Revisit it again, raise the emotions again, and just let it subside again. And then once everybody's too tired, to sort of, and the emotions are on the floor, it's then you go, okay, everybody's had their bit, everybody's had their say. Okay, and we can still do that now at sort of we're probably about 150 people across all of product and technology, but I think soon that's not going to last any longer. So we're going to have to go away and think, how do we make how do a few people make these religious decisions and take enough people with us? Because I think we're now reaching the point where everybody can't be involved, in these decisions, or at least everybody will be informed rather than be involved. And, that's the balance you're going to do. So, Vineet, let's jump into it. Sort of how do you sort of manage this consistency among all these teams?
Cool. So I mean, I'll go back to the same inception part. So inception is where everybody comes together and gets the same idea of the product, right? Once that is done, then everything, runs like a very well-oiled engine. So everybody has the idea that what the overall product is. Then it comes to the designers. Designers actually will, based on whatever they got through the inception. We follow Agile very strictly. So Agile, we write those stories, we write proper acceptance criteria. That is where the major time is spent, so that we cover every aspect, so that all of the acceptance criteria are met by the backend engineers and then by the front-end engineers. The other thing which we also enforce is that once we get out of that inception meeting, any communication would happen only through proper documentation, right? Though Agile says, people over process and on that, but we say that it has to be documented properly, so that the backend, once the backend is done, the QAs will receive that documentation, whatever has been implemented, and test it accordingly, and they will also verify it against your user story, right? Then, and similarly, that has been picked up with along with the designs with the front-end engineers, and then finally, it is being built. So that is how we ensure consistency, that everybody who, whatever your, it's like Chinese whispers as well, right? So you start off with something, but in the end, what comes out might be completely different from what was initially planned. But because you have those user stories and the acceptance criteria, at every step, those are validated, whether those were met or not. And that helps us maintaining consistency.
That's really interesting, because what you've sort of got is a very loosely structured organization that appears to be very mission specific. But you've really sort of, I think it speaks to Mike's point as well, you've really narrowed down, right, here's the stability. There's a skeleton there somewhere. In some organizations, the skeleton is structure. In your organization, it's the specific process around the documentation. That's the sort of skeleton that allows all this flexibility and agility to happen elsewhere. I think that's really interesting that both the organizations, there's some sort of framework that allows this dynamism to happen, because there's always this stability which is true no matter what. And I think that's really interesting. Did you make that decision explicitly, you decided that, or has that just been the results of your lessons you've learned over time?
Actually, I would love to take the credit for that, but actually it is not. It's been it's been followed in the organization. Before I had actually joined, so it's been followed very strictly, and this is one of the product principles which have been there. It has worked, and then of course, why do you want to change it? If it is working.
Yeah, exactly. So this is fascinating. So the two main themes that have already sort of come out from exploration is the sort of managing of consistencies between the teams, which is what we've just covered, and then also sort of being able to sort of balance the sort of empowerment and alignment as well, which is a slightly different take on the sort of same subject. I think what's sort of, I'm surprised that nobody brought up in terms of what keeps chief of products or head of products, but I always like to see that. So he does keep me up at night for a number of reasons. One through Slack, and two, sort of, okay, where are we going next? I'd really like to hear. Let's start with you, Mike. Like, what's your experience? How does is there an element of that with you, and sort of how do you manage that?
Oh, good question. It helps that I've worked with Michael for a long time, and before here as well. And it also helps that sort of backgrounds and culture are similar. So the expectation levels are kind of in the right space. I mean, I think it would be a weird organization if I empowered all of my teams to do what they want to do, and he didn't empower me to run the direction of the product and the strategy. So actually, that sort of decentralization model is pretty endemic in the culture that we've built and that we're building. So I'm very fortunate in the sense that I don't quite get left alone, because I don't think anybody does, right? But I get the freedom to sort of explain the rationale for why we're moving in directions that we're moving in terms of the solutions we're putting out and some of the challenges that go with that. Inevitably, I wait for the edict from on high. So far, touch wood, I'm taking it as a vote of confidence. I haven't had one of those yet, which again, I'm sure we will sort of grow into. I think one of the things that does make a big difference in that kind of managing up piece is there are very few surprises in our organization because of this comms model and openness and transparency model that we run. So it's unlikely that there's any period of more than a few days or a week where anything can be going on that isn't visible actually if you're just looking. And so I think where the managing up thing becomes, you know, very problematic is where there are surprises, right? In any direction, those are just tough, right?
Yes, definitely up as well as down. I think
thankfully we're kind of trying to preempt some of that with the openness piece.
Yeah, and I think what I found is Norris and other CEOs, if you tell them early that something's not on track or something's at risk, they're a hell of a lot more forgiving. I wouldn't say they're perfectly forgiving and everything's fine, but they're a hell of a lot more forgiving than if you say, the day before something's going to be released, right? Okay, it's another week, it's another month or something. So sort of the proactive. But how do you manage, and this is what I'm struggling with is, and now we've got quite a number of teams, I don't know, I know a lot of the detail, but I don't know exactly everything that all the teams are doing. So I'll get asked a question about a specific feature on a specific, a specific field on a specific feature on a specific team. I just don't have the answer. How do you sort of, how do you respond to sort of the really, really detailed questions?
I mean, I have to confess, I sort of operate on the principle that if I can't find people who know their products better than I do, then I've just got the wrong people. And so if they know better than me, then I'm not going to know the answer to those questions. That's just not going to happen. So I'm happy to take a sort of if it was a problem, I'd have seen it and I'd have done something with it. That means it's kind of an inquiry, and from my perspective, with the greatest respect to anybody, an inquiry goes to the only people that can answer the question, right? And so that to me would be, product owner pounds, product owner international. That's what these guys do. And then actually what I find is that that's quite an interesting check, because it's a check on me as an individual, because if I can answer every single one of these questions, I'm too much in the detail anyway. Actually, it's like I should not be able to. If everybody is running really fast, then that would make me a bottleneck. So again, I think I've been caught out a couple of times in that space where I have found myself assuming something, and I've been a bit out of touch. Again, I've only found those to be problems if it was a problem rather than I'm just interested in, or I met this person and they were interested in, and those things. They just have to go to the people who know best, which is either the engineers working on that specific piece of functionality or the product owners on that piece.
I think that's really interesting. So
I have a fault, right? I can't keep it all in my head.
Yeah, so I sort of I'm in two minds about this. Is one, I at least want an understanding, at least at a high level, so that when somebody asks, at least I can answer or at least provide some context, so that you don't have to ask the team, versus if it's actually quite specific and quite technical, then actually you're sort of completely right. Okay, yeah, I'm definitely not the right person to ask about this, sort of clear that. So Vineet, I'm really interested to hear, with such amazing growth and scaling and with this sort of ambiguity around teams, sort of, how do you manage up? How do you sort of work that?
So basically, I mean, there are three things which we do on a regular basis. One is your daily stand-ups. That clearly across all products. I mean, that is mandatory that that I attend all of them, and all of them. Mostly, each product will not have more than 15 minutes of stand-up, right? I mean, it's very tight thing wherein you actually talk about what you did yesterday and then what did you do today and what I mean, are you blocked on something, right? I mean, that gives me an exact idea of what and what is going wrong, or what is getting blocked, or when can things be delivered, right? Then you have your an 8-week plan, which is generally being reported by the product owners on a week-on-week basis. So we always have an 8-week roadmap always ready, which is, I mean, detailed out to an extent, so that, I mean, we have an idea what is the general direction now in which we are taking. So based on this, I mean, this is enough information for me to provide to everybody, I mean, all the stakeholders. Mostly, I mean, that works out that ways. Most of the time, I mean, you get a question that when is it coming out live, right? I mean, that is where this helps. If there are details regarding any of the product, right, which goes to that what is that configuration, whether this product is able to do this or that or not. I mean, that definitely, I mean, is documented in a lot of places. I might not have all of this information, but yes, if I cannot find it in any of the documentation, that is where we ask to update the product doc, so that, I mean, the product doc is shared all the time, and the product doc is always updated and is always up to date, and so that, I mean, we have all the answers which are there. Because see, with the scale, there are a lot of stakeholders, right? I mean, you have to have that level of information is needed by the ops team as well. The customer complaints, I mean, we need to have that information, right? I mean, so that is where we have most of these things listed down. And that is how, I mean, mostly when we manage all of this.
Okay, no, that sounds really, I think we do something similar. We have our Scrum of Scrums at 9:30 where all the team leads come, and it's definitely not beating them up. It's not a progress up to date. It's just all good. Yeah, and if it's not, then yeah, the CEO who attends the Scrum of Scrums or myself can just jump on something and fix it. But at least in that way, I have sort of reasonable, good situational awareness of what the teams are working on. And if there's a problem, there's 24 hours before, maximum 24 hours before, I can bring the CCO or the CEO in on the problem and say, look, can you just phone this company, phone the CEO, let's fix this problem. Or if the decisions made, I try not to make decisions as a rule, about the empowerment piece. But if a trade-off does need to be made, we can make it like once every 24 hours, make it quickly. Just make sure we catch it. But that's for me how I balance that. I try to pull the CEO into that, so I try to get him to update himself rather than me, and that really sort of helps sort of us share the same context quite frequently. Brilliant. I think, thank you, Vineet. Mike, thank you so much. These were fantastic, your responses. Some stuff that I did anticipate, some stuff that I didn't. I've definitely taken a lot away from this in terms of rethinking what I'm doing now and what we're doing here at Monese, and what potentially we should move to in the future. And I'm going to love catching up with both of you separately, for a beer and coffee, for another Zoom with you, Vineet, over in India, and sort of carrying on the conversation. Thank you very much. It's learned a great deal. Ryan, it's all yours.
Yeah, all right. So before the train leaves the station here, we've got a lot to decipher through. So we got lots of things to mind in the gap. Now, if I had to ask you each a pointed question of what is the most dangerous part of this gap, understanding there's a communication between your team, we're talking about everything from blah to blah, and maybe like a one sentence high level, maybe Vineet, you can go first since you're not on mute. What is, we've talked about what we're doing, maybe what is your one piece of advice to avoid or to not do? Since everything has really been focused on what to do, maybe a last final thought of what not to do, or one of the things that will cause you to fall in the gap.
So the number one thing to avoid is actually, go deeper into any of these products. Always keep a 30,000 feet view, so that and let the product owners actually do the deep dive. So that is, you are aware of all the products and have the big picture. So that is a trap which you fall into because of your closeness to the product.
Okay, I dig it. Mike, how about you? Anything to avoid as a final thought if you could have told your younger self?
Yeah, I should never have got on that train. No. Vineet has stolen mine. And by that, I mean he had it before me. Same thing, right? It's not possible in a scaling organization to know the answer to every random question you're going to get asked, and nor should it be an expectation. And people throw that at product people all the time, right? Because usually it's an answer kind of response kind of environment as well, an SME environment. It's just not possible. So don't sweat it, and always find better people than you are. That is definitely the way.
All right, I dig it. So my final roundup here is that, if we're using this analogy of different teams as different trains, I heard things about, how do you communicate this vision? How do you get inside of the brain of the founder and this overarching? And it's almost like, as a managerial role in this product and product teams, you're sitting in the engineering booth. You don't have time to be on the train with these individuals, especially if you have remote teams. So this idea of minding the gap through communicating face-to-face, through having regular meetings, through the ways in which you're determining the schedule of the trains and how things are going in what direction, I'm really assuming that you guys are in these controller seats and you're not on the train. And the gap happens when you try to leave the control room and get onto the train, but now you're going in one direction, but you have another team going to that direction. Then when it scales, everything becomes confusing. And you have the challenge of, like, how centralized versus decentralized, and the ability to let people choose their own trains to get to the destination versus mapping things out. And so it sounds like it's not one single solution, but it's really being able to listen to how your teams operate. It depends on if they're physically able to meet in the train station or if they're taking virtual tickets. So, as my notes sort of detail here, there's a lot of things that are going on, and they all stem from which is the gap. But I think today we got a good view of a number of different ways that people who listen can take individual parts and try to implement that. Even to Max, where he's maybe thinking about doing things a little bit differently now. And I think the more we can share these types of what works and what doesn't, gives everybody a chance to pick and choose their own schedule, their own train station, so that they don't fall into the gap. So if you are out there managing teams, whether it's small teams and you're on your way to scaling, listening back and taking some minute notes there. One of the first things I wrote down was that vision doesn't necessarily scale by itself. You have to create the communication. You have to empower people through getting everybody on the same page to make sure that you get to the right spot. So what a great conversation, everybody. If you want to hear more of these, check out ScaleUpValley.com. We're talking with amazing experts like this, and we're getting inside their brains so they can teach us how to scale better and faster. So I would assume that you guys should all connect with these individuals online, follow the companies, use their services, poke and prod until you get what you need, so that we can all get on the train and get to our destination and not on the wrong train. Okay, guys, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. We will see you guys online or so, and continue to keep scaling, all right?